Are we live?
Pass.
Okay. Sorry, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Scotland at 7. A little bit late. Sorry about the chaos earlier on there. We've been having problems getting in and out because of the bad weather this evening. With me this evening to discuss the day's breaking stories is Chris McCusker, who is the... is it still the SNP's deputy? Is it deputy convener? I always forget.
Vice convener. I thought you were going to put me up as deputy leader there.
Oh no, that was promotion too far, Chris. So Chris, welcome again back to the show.
Thanks very much, Gordon.
Now we've got quite a packed programme tonight. There's quite a lot of things happening in the news. The first item on the agenda tonight is actually Donald Trump. And we know that the United States House Speaker Nancy Pelosi announced on Thursday that she was directing the Judiciary Committee to draft articles of impeachment against Donald Trump. And she said, the President leaves us no choice but to act. Sadly, with the confidence and humility, with the allegiance to our founders and a heart full of love for America, today I'm asking our chairman to proceed with the articles of impeachment. So this sounds very much like the official starting pistol for an actual impeachment. It's finally happening.
And does this explain the unexplained as to why he left the summit in, what was it, Herefordshire?
Watford, I believe.
Watford, I believe. I was putting it in a more salubrious setting, I do apologise. But he basically left that nice and early after they had badmouthed President Trudeau.
Yes, who in one moment he said was two-faced, and in the next sentence said he really liked him. So I was baffled by, I must admit. Yes, so Trump's disappeared off early from the NATO summit. Possibly to get back to DC to get prepared for this.
Face the music, hopefully.
Pelosi said that Trump had engaged in misconduct on a historic scale. The facts are uncontested, Pelosi said. The president abused his power for his own personal political benefit at the expense of our national security by withholding military aid on a crucial Oval Office meeting exchange for the announcement of an investigation into his political rival. The president's actions are a profound violation of public trust. The president's actions have seriously violated the Constitution, especially when he says and acts upon the belief that Article 2 says I can do what I want. No. So there she is quoting the Constitution.
Yeah, but no didn't have a question mark after it.
Well, I think it was more of an emphatic statement by Pelosi that no president...
You know, was it an open-ended statement, or was it a definitive no, you cannot do what you want and you need to get back here toot sweet and justify yourself?
Yeah.
If you look back at the previous impeachments that America have had, the likes of Clinton and Nixon, they all, once the impeachment was sort of like first mooted, they all offered evidence otherwise, and Trump has yet failed to do so.
Well, in all three of the previous cases of impeachment, if I remember correctly, there have been no actual impeachments. They would get to the point of being impeached and then resign at the last moment. So rather than the embarrassment, presumably, of being impeached, they would just simply resign. Presumably to avoid the ignominy of actually being impeached, or being the first president to actually be impeached. There is some more here on this story. In a sombre delivery, a methodical quotation from the founding fathers, James Madison, George Mason and Benjamin Franklin, Miss Pelosi hewed into a democratic strategy of framing the impeachment inquiry as a joyless task made imperative by the historic dimension of Trump's abuse of power. So she's really trying to invoke the whole power and spirit of the American Constitution here and the founding fathers.
Yeah, but funnily enough, actually, I was having a chat with a friend of mine on Facebook today about the old black and white movies. We were discussing Jimmy Cagney, and one of his greatest films, I think, that he ever done was Yankee Doodle Dandy. And it charts the the character's sort of like life through Broadway vaudeville and stuff like that, to eventually during the war he pens a song. I think it's something to do with the flag or something like that. You're a bright flag or something like that, or whatever. Yeah. But it was all that flag waving and stuff like that. You know, hurrah, hurrah. And it led them to getting some special commendation from the president himself. And everything was all sort of like, you know, themed outside the statue of Abe Lincoln and stuff like that. So
it's all very carefully staged.
Yeah. You know, I mean, it was a great propaganda piece.
Without a royal family, American politics has to try to come up with some way of creating a bit of pomp and circumstance, a bit of political theatre, I suppose. In this case, Miss Pelosi has said, let's say, in the course of today's events, it becomes necessary for us to address, among other grievances, the president's failure to faithfully uphold the law. Pelosi did not indicate what might be the precise nature of the potential articles of impeachment, so she's not revealed her hand yet. She's not come up with I suppose, the damning evidence that she wants to put forward.
Well, I'm actually hoping that Trump has underestimated her. Do you know what I mean? Because you know, it would be a great story, notwithstanding the fact that it would be a great coup de grace to actually bring Donald Trump to his knees, because you know, right at this moment in time, you know, he's quite clearly he's believing his own press, and he's bigger than you know, in danger of getting bigger than his own boots. Do you know what I mean? And going forward, I would not like to see Trump and Johnson, you know, side to side.
In power together.
Yeah, in power together, basically.
And doing a trade deal whereby anything might happen.
Anything, you know, anything could happen.
In other posts today, I noticed an interesting post from a group of 70, I think it was, American psychiatrists and psychologists who were concerned about Mr. Trump's mental state, particularly when he was coming back from the meeting in Watford with the NATO heads, that he was looking particularly enraged, and they're worried that with his sort of rather narcissistic kind of temperament, that he might do something rash
and do something stupid.
And they were putting this forward as further evidence that the impeachment is putting psychological pressure on the president. He might actually crack under the strain.
I mean, it would, you know, it would take obviously someone of great strength of character to go through an impeachment process. And whilst I know something about Nixon, I would more say that Clinton is more relevant. You know, because the story is more fresh in the mind. You know,
Clinton's case, it was a sex scandal. I would have said that Nixon was closer, because Nixon was involved, covering up a crime, a burglary at an office. This is another one of these. This is more like almost extortion or bribery, trying to bribe another country's leader into doing something. Again, it's an offence for an American president.
But you know, in which they've got clear evidence of that happening. So you know, it sort of like gives me heart, the fact that it could lead to something. However, knowing Trump for the last, not personally, I need to point that out to you folks, but knowing the character of Trump for the last couple of years, you've just got this horrible thing in the back of your mind which says he's going to squirm out of this somewhere.
You think he's going to somehow wriggle out?
He's going to.
Made of Teflon. Although most of the two other presidents who were the subject of impeachments in recent times, as we've been talking about, both resigned before it got to that stage. Perhaps they knew that they couldn't win it, and it was going to damage them even more if they simply allowed the impeachment to win.
But the one thing that I would say about those two presidents is the fact that they had something that Trump doesn't have.
A sense of honour.
Well, I was going to say integrity, but
Integrity.
you know, if you want to call it a sense of honour, I would. I mean, even although Clinton was, you know, accused of lewd and libidinous behaviour, you would still think that he had some sense of integrity to say, look, I can't get away with this routine, and I need to sort of fess up. But I don't think that Trump has actually got that built in his DNA.
One of the interesting conversations I've had recently was with Dr. Mark McNaught last summer. We were talking about constitutions and a constitution for an independent Scotland. And one of the reasons that he cited for having a constitution was its ability to unseat the leader. And to bring them before the law, which in the United Kingdom there is no way to do, because Westminster is the highest court in England anyway, in terms of judging politicians. They can't be judged before a criminal court, apparently. They can only be... So here would be a wonderful reason for Scotland to try and get itself a constitution once it's independent, for the simple reason that if somebody starts abusing power, there's a way... you know, a legal remedy to remove them by impeachment. Yeah.
Well, funnily enough, actually, I also know Mark McNaught as well. He actually sent me that draft constitution that he wrote. It does make for really good reading. And
I know Mike Russell has a copy of it.
Yes. But more so was the fact that he also wrote that to be adapted into the Glasgow Council. So that the Glasgow Council had a
constitutional model as well. It could be used at local level too.
To which I forwarded on to my comrade Graham Campbell, Councillor Graham Campbell, for him to peruse and look through it and see, you know, how it could possibly be adapted. I think, however, Mark was maybe about a week or 2 weeks late, because I was told that they already adopted one.
For the council.
For the council, yeah.
Well, I'd like to move on now, Chris, if I may, to our next story. And this is a story of an Indian woman who has apparently been set on fire on her way to a court hearing to testify against two men who had allegedly raped her. The 23-year-old is in a critical condition in hospital with 70% burns after she was set upon by 5 men in the city of Unnao in Uttar Pradesh. They dragged her into a field, doused her with petrol and set her alight. This is a horrific story. It's unbelievable.
Horrendous.
It is the latest in a series of brutal attacks against women in India that have caused a wave of outrage across the country. Last week, a 26-year-old veterinary doctor in Hyderabad was gang raped and asphyxiated to death, and her body burned and dumped. Days later, in the state of Bihar, a teenager was allegedly gang raped and killed before her body was also set on fire. So there seems to be a rash of these terrible attacks against women.
Yeah, I heard this as I was driving in through the traffic, and I was absolutely shocked to the core. Do you know that this is still hanging? I mean, it further highlights how women are treated in that country, and how they're almost totally disregarded out of hand, you know, and of course it also raises the question of higher corruption.
Yeah, who's letting it happen and
why? Yeah.
Well, I'd like to talk more about this, Chris, but because we're running a little bit behind schedule, we're going to move on to our next story this evening. And this is the story. The SNP will today launch a final campaign push to bring people together to vote SNP to stop Brexit, to protect our NHS and to lock Boris Johnson out of Downing Street. And speaking before the start of the final week, SNP National Campaign Tour, the SNP leader, Nicola Sturgeon, has said in 7 days' time, vote SNP to escape Brexit and lock Boris Johnson out of office. People in Scotland have the right to determine their own future instead of Boris Johnson deciding it for them. Now, I detect a slight change of what you might call framing from the SNP in terms of the message that's being given to the voters. It's not any longer a message which says you're voting for independence. This is voting in an election to say that you want the right to vote on independence.
Well, I think Nicola's been pretty clear on that, and she's always been very careful to use her words. How can I put it? Deliberately. And the way that she was framing it in those TV debates, especially to Richard Leonard, it was more of the fact that it's not her or the SNP that is demanding an IndyRef.
No,
it's the
always got
citizens of Scotland.
It has to be the people.
Yeah. You know, and if the citizens of Scotland don't want an IndyRef, right, which I don't believe for a second that that they wouldn't, but it would then be okay. They don't want it. We'll move on. What I can't understand is that this inexplicable ability that the unionist parties have, that the SNP can't do the day job and campaign on independence at the same time.
Surely this is really just a distracting tactic from the unionist side to try and take the spotlight off the whole issue of the Scottish people's right to vote on their own self-determination when they feel like it, and instead try and cast the light onto the day job, the hospitals, the schools, and all the rest of it.
But I think Nicola started it, in the correct manner, and sort of like stated the obvious as the fact that for time immemorial, the SNP have stood for independence. Right? I'm not.
It's never going to change.
And and make no mistake, once we get independence, they will continue to work to make sure that we stay independent.
Well, one of the things I detected, Chris, perhaps you have an opinion on this, is in the wording being used now by the SNP, there are subtleties and nuances in the way words are being used. I noticed, for example, recently when Nicola Sturgeon was talking about asking or requesting a Section 30 order before the end of this year, no matter who was in power, that she said specifically that she would use a legal road such as a Section 30 order, which lets me, or leaves a door open, I think, for other forms of legal roads or pathways towards an independence referendum. So there must be a plan B. There's definitely an implication in the words there.
There is a definite implication in the words, but I would probably say that Nicola sees the road to independence being a lot smoother if Jeremy Corbyn is in office.
I can imagine, yes. She would see him as maybe somebody a little bit more reasonable to do business with.
And, I mean, quite clearly Boris Johnson has, ruled it out. Not going to happen within his tenure. You had, Daddy Carlo turn around and say, well, 2054 would be, not a...
But I think it's just...
Where did they pluck that?
I think it's just a provocation, is it not, from Carlo? He's just basically trying to poke fun and mock the First Minister. Mrs. Nicola Sturgeon went on to say that the people in Scotland do have a right to determine their own future instead of Boris Johnson. Mr Johnson's extreme Brexit is the biggest threat to the NHS since it was founded. He must be stopped next Thursday or it will be open season on Scotland as the Tories start to impose their hardline Brexit scheme. Now, Boris Johnson has said quite clearly that if he wins this election, he will be going for Brexit early in the new year to get that done, as he says. Yeah. And then he claims that he can do a trade deal in the next 11 months after that. There is nobody, as far as I can see, and I've read extensively across the European Union's website and its feeds, no one in the European Union believes this is possible.
Yeah.
What are the chances then of a no-deal Brexit? Are they higher now?
Well, I would say that they're higher now, but we have to remember that it took, 7 years for the trade deal to be done with Canada.
And it's still not finished.
And it's still not finished. So I mean, I think it's demonstrable to think that he can basically cross the I's and dot the T's, and make no mistake, Brexit will be with us for the next decade.
I suspect actually that it may be just my suspicion, but watching the way or listening to the way that the Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been talking, he obviously doesn't see doing a good trade deal with the European Union as being as important as having a deal with America. And I believe that seems to be the way things are heading. And what we have seen also from Dominic Raab in the past few days is an admission that the NHS is on the table to a large extent, and the cost of NHS drugs, if we were to do a deal with American big pharmaceutical companies, we would end up paying far more for our drugs than an American trade deal.
Well, the other thing as well is that people need to be realistic and realise the fact that there is American medical companies operating in
already
Britain
here
at this moment in time, right? You only have to look at Virgin Medicare. You only have to look at the outsourcing of the ambulance service.
And some laboratory services.
Some of the laboratory services as well, and then you only have to look at the small amount of drug companies that actually do get licenses that are from America. So it is ever encroaching further in.
So it's sort of privatisation by 1,000 cuts.
By 1,000 cuts, yeah. If you want to put it like that. The one thing that Jeremy Corbyn has said is that he would not further any of these deals.
You'd think not.
He wouldn't cut any of them back at this moment in time, but he wouldn't further them.
He probably wouldn't be able to if contracts have been signed
to
turn them around.
Exactly.
Not in that term.
Yeah. So he's quite right in saying that. But the deal that Jeremy Corbyn would probably wish to further with the European Union is obviously a close as possible relationship with regards to obviously trade, employment rights, workers' rights, and all the rest of it, and full access for freedom of movement.
But we know that we know that Mr. Corbyn is ambivalent. He's taking a neutral stance on Brexit. But moving to the next story, actually talking about neutral stances, brings us actually to Britain's Brexit Party, which said on Thursday, said that. There's also where are we? Okay, I've got it here. The Britain's Brexit Party said on Thursday that 4 of its elected members of the European Parliament, so these are MEPs, have left the party to support the governing Conservatives in the British election on the 12th of December.
Yeah.
But I mean, again, this is another one of these interesting ones where the rats are jumping off the
I think ship. This has been pre-manufactured, to be honest with you. It's so transparent, it's unreal. I would probably suspect that Nigel Farage had this in mind as early as last month, probably even way before the election was announced. So you only have to look at his original stance, which was, I'm going to field candidates in every constituency. Then he rolled back from that and said, I'm standing down all the candidates in the Conservative seats
as well.
And
the other side of the flip side of the coin, we've heard just today that a Tory MEP and an advisor have both backed the SNP for general election. So we've had a warning over Boris Johnson's disastrous Brexit deal when a former Scottish Tory MEP and a Tory advisor have today announced their support for the SNP at the election. In yet another blow to the Tory campaign in Scotland, a businessman, Ian Dale, who served as the Tory MEP for the Lothians, and former Tory advisor Dr Bender Grosvenor a prominent art historian and co-presenter of BBC 4's Britain's Lost Masterpieces, have both backed the SNP at the election. And the only party that can protect Scotland from Boris Johnson's disastrous Brexit deal. So a major shake-up.
Major shake-up, yeah. The other thing that I wanted to point out as well with these 4 MEPs is the fact that they are all connected to, guess who? Jacob Rees-Mogg. One's his wife, the other one's his cousin, and the other one he was in banking with. So the 4 of them are interconnected. So I mean, you know, take that from what you want, folks. But that further backs up my claim that this was already preordained.
Well, I've got some interesting some comments from Mr. DL. He's basically saying here that on so many issues, I do not recognise today's Conservative Party. Yeah. The party I joined almost 50 years ago, worked for, and served in London and Europe, is not one I can support any longer. He obviously feels that the old style Scottish Tories that he was a member of has just disappeared and been replaced by some very far right. What can we say?
You might say far right. I don't think that. I don't think that Jackson Carlaw is capable of being far right. He's more centre right than anything else. The biggest loss to the Scottish Tories, I have to admit, actually, is Ruth Davidson. Yeah. That sellable asset, the darling of the chat shows, shall we say, Jackson Carlaw is not.
No, sadly he's not.
Well, not sadly he's not, but
he came over rather as a bit of a bully on the.
He tried to come over as a bit of a bully, and you now see that he has rolled back himself on the stance. If you think back to 2016, he happily stood alongside Ruth Davidson and said that he was campaigning to remain.
Well, of course,
now he's fully in Boris Johnson's camp.
But he's an unsuccessful car salesman, so I mean, if you wouldn't buy a
used car salesman, can we just point that out?
Anyway,
and a collector of fine antiquities of art, I do believe.
Well, the gentleman we're talking about, who was the Conservative Party advisor, Mr. Bender, what was his name? He's got an interesting name, Mr. Bender Grosvenor. He also said, and I'm quoting here, "I've been dismayed to see the Scottish Conservative MPs doing nothing to protect Scotland's interests over Brexit, despite holding the balance of power in the House of Commons." He said, "For that reason, I'm supporting Callum and the SNP," so this is the candidate and his constituency, in order to help ensure Scotland's voice cannot be ignored again. So quite a turnaround there to see Tories, 2 of them in one fell swoop, actually jumping ship and backing the SNP.
I don't know about you, Gordon. I don't see a complete wipeout of Tory MPs in Scotland.
You think there'll always be one or two?
I think there'll always be one or two
weeds
hiding
between
about
the paving
scrubs. Aye.
They just keep popping up here and there.
Aye. Quite a few of the more prominent ones, yes. But I would. It's a difficult one to call, but the man with no face, Alistair Jack. Oh, yes. It'd be interesting to see if he survives the.
Well, I have heard that he's on a bit of a sugary peg as well.
Sugary nail. Excellent.
Speaking of sugary pegs, brings me back to Boris Johnson, I'm afraid. And Boris Johnson's plan not to hold the UK budget until February has been branded contempt for Scotland by Scotland's Finance Secretary Derek Mackay. Delaying the budget means the Scottish government will not know how much funding is available and cannot give budgets to our other public services, to the NHS or local authorities. So we've been left hanging in limbo, unable to finance our own public services until this fiasco is over.
And wait until the unionist MPs turn around and start bashing us over the head by saying, the
NHS is in crisis.
The NHS is in crisis. The economy's going to hell in a handbasket, and again, it's another indicator of the fact that not content with only having one hand tied behind her back, we're now tying both.
Well, it seems another one of these moves designed specifically by the Conservative Party to hobble the whole independence movement and the SNP in particular. It also leaves the Scottish Parliament with potentially only weeks instead of months to scrutinise and debate the budget. And Derek Mackay has said the Tories have a long track record of ignoring the needs of the people of Scotland, but delaying the UK budget until February, just weeks before the new financial year, is nothing short of contempt for Scotland and for devolution. Having wrecked their own parliamentary processes, now they want to damage ours too. Under the current arrangements, we need a UK budget before we can set the Scottish budget. Well, that obviously follows, doesn't it? Because our budget follows the Barnett formula, which is based on whatever England happens to spend on its public services. So everything is contingent on what happens south of the border.
But what would give me a bit of confidence is that if Corbyn actually gets in number 10 and makes this a priority, that would go towards some sort of
some quid pro quo with the SNP.
Quid pro quo, maybe
coming a little towards the SNP and
prepared to show willing. Yes. However, if he took the same time schedule in order to sort out a budget, I would say that's just typical of Westminster, just totally disregarding this.
It always seems to me, anyway, at a personal level, that everything that the Conservative government does is designed to make Scotland wait for England to act first. And we always have to wait for the other shoe to drop before we can do anything. One of the biggest problems of devolution is this constant waiting for England to decide something so that we can decide what we need to do. And obviously one of the benefits of independence will be not having to do that anymore, being able to just set your budget as you wish instead of waiting for somebody else.
And it's something that I can't understand because in recent weeks, these leadership debates, you see the unionist parties trying to hit the SNP over the head with the big rusty nail of the fact that you're underperforming and you're not doing this and you're not doing that and you're not doing the next thing. And I find it rather than inexplicable is that the levers that we need in order to connect our economy up correctly are all reserved to Westminster. And you were making the analogy earlier on of the scarecrow, the tin man and the lion.
Yes.
Yes,
I was referring to the leaders of the UK parties in Scotland.
The scarecrow for me, would just isn't competent enough to actually stand up and say, well, we actually do need these things, right? The lion, who has got no courage, which would be Richard Leonard, won't argue to devolve the necessary levers that we need, like full taxation, full benefit,
he's
employment law, immigration, because he has been controlled by his leader down south. In a very similar vein, the same as Jackson Carlaw, he will just do whatever his southern masters instruct him to do in order to keep Scotland in its place.
Well, breaking from the usual three suspects, the three amigos, I'd like to talk a little bit now, Chris, about Scotland's police service. It's been announced that Professor Susan Deakin, has resigned as chairwoman of Scotland's police watchdog, saying that the system is fundamentally flawed. Professor Deakin said that she had worked tirelessly to ensure that the SPA operated effectively and that the public confidence and trust in policing was maintained. However, and I'll quote here, "In truth, I have increasingly become convinced that the governance and accountability arrangements for policing in Scotland are fundamentally flawed in structure, culture and practice. And I conclude that there is little more I can do to make these arrangements work effectively. She basically seems to be saying that the system is rubbish and I can't make it work, so I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
This is a woman who's put there to troubleshoot the system and fix it.
Yeah. I mean, maybe she's got an element of self-doubt within her own capabilities. Maybe she doesn't have any faith in the general direction of travel, and she is quite right to tender her resignation, as is everyone else.
Well,
what gets me is the fact that the chap who is sort of like taken over from her in the interim has said the complete opposite to what she has cited.
Is this the police? Is it Chief Constable?
Chief Constable,
we'll find
Chief Superintendent or something like that.
The person involved shortly.
One of the heat bummers.
Well, the professor has also stated, here she says, I would suggest that the Scottish Government thinks afresh about how the police service is scrutinised and held to account, and how, or if, a better separation between politics and policing, and indeed between the police service and those who oversee it, can be achieved. This appears to be her referring to the arm's length nature of the police service in Scotland, so that it can be and act independently of government.
Yeah.
So it doesn't become an instrument of state oppression or control.
Which
I think is what we want to see.
I would say that. And the two have to be kept completely separate. You don't want the police to be politicised. You want them to remain completely impartial. You would like to believe that they have autonomy to do what they are, set out to do. And the last thing you would want to think or believe is that there is bureaucracy, which is clouding any internal judgments within the police force or police federation.
The reasons that she's given for her leaving really seem to cast doubt on the whole system of police scrutiny. We've also got a statement here from the Scottish Police Federation. Let me see if I can find this, where they express their views on the reason for her leaving as well. First of all, let me just say here that the Scottish Police Federation has said of this resignation that it was not a surprise to them. Its chairwoman, Andrea MacDonald, has said it's been apparent to the Scottish Police Federation that the authority has not been operating effectively for some time. It nonetheless is disappointing that we now see the Scottish Police Authority looking for its fourth chair in 6 years. This appears to be a really hot potato and something of a poisoned chalice for anybody who takes up the position.
It's whilst I would like to point out that anything to do with the police is obviously worrying. I find the timing of this press release somewhat badly judged, shall we say? And I'm wondering if there's something else that we're not being told about this. At a time when the SNP are lauding the fact that we have got 1,000 more police officers, and the wage increase to our police officers is a lot better than
there is also
else
the
in country.
issue of the timing of this resignation as well. I think it's important, coming as it does 1 week before a very important general election for Scotland. And the police service in Scotland is seen as a bit of a political football, with the opposition parties constantly complaining about Police Scotland. And, I mean, there's been reaction from other politicians. Scottish Labour has said the resignation raises serious questions about the SPA's ability to oversee Police Scotland. And it's almost verbatim what Professor Deakin said herself. The Labour Party is saying almost exactly the same thing. Which party did she represent?
I think she was in Labour.
Was she? That's a strange coincidence.
I think so. But I mean, at the last independence rally in Freedom Square that I attended, I was chatting to a police officer just round at the sort of like cordon.
Yeah.
And I happened to notice that his uniform, he was wearing a Union Jack on his uniform, and his counterpart wasn't.
You think this is significant?
And I asked him, why are you wearing that and he's not? And, and quite plainly to my face, he said, well, I believe in the Union. He doesn't.
And so that was his way of showing
his
allegiance.
Way of, showing his allegiance.
Well, there is also a comment from the Chief Inspector of Constabulary for Scotland, Gil Imrie, who told Holyrood's Justice Committee on Tuesday that senior officers at Police Scotland had become frustrated, in inverted commas, at the lack of scrutiny. In an earlier report, she said there was no clear vision, strategy or plan in place for the SPA. And this is coming from the police service itself.
Yeah.
So the police service is basically saying that it's Her Majesty's Chief Inspector of Constabulary for Scotland. And basically criticising the board which runs Police Scotland. So being criticised from outside.
Yeah, but then I thought this was what they wanted all along, was to have complete transparency and be open to constructive criticism, to take it on board and then act upon it. You can't have it both ways.
Okay. Well, the question really is, has Professor Deakin succeeded in doing the task that she was hired to do, which was to fix the system of scrutiny? She's now saying that she can't do the job that she was hired to do.
Yeah.
And that's why she's resigning.
Which is why I said at the outset...
So she seems to have failed.
Yeah, but that's why I said at the outset, has she woken up and realised that this job is bigger than what she thought?
It's a difficult
job. When she originally took it on. And she is now saying, I can no longer discharge my duties to the best of my intentions because I'm out of my depth. If that's the case, then I've got to commend her for standing back and saying, this is bigger than what I thought.
There are some positive comments, and here's one here from the Scottish Police Authority's Vice Chairman, David Crichton, who's going to lead the SPA until a new appointment can be made. He said, "We believe the system of governance and accountability for policing in Scotland that was envisaged by the founding legislation is sound and can work effectively. While we respect this personal decision of the Chair, our collective focus will be on working together with our dedicated staff team to build on recent progress, deliver the actions and the improvements already identified." So obviously there is a difference of opinion here, where the Vice Chairman of the Police Authority says there has been progress made, and they are building on it.
Yeah, but it's down to that ethic of do you have a can-do attitude? And quite clearly she hasn't got a can-do attitude, and she said, look, this job's not for me, and that's why I can say, fine, fair play. Even Nicola turned round and said, I want to thank her for the work that she's done. I've had no problem with her.
So you think this is maybe just a known story? It just happens to have been timed to happen just before a critical election?
I would possibly
maybe
concur with that.
Move, possibly.
I would definitely concur with that. Making no sort of like ties.
How about for a wee change, Chris? We'll talk about something good that's happened in Scotland in the past days. Scottish Power plans to add solar and battery power to wind farms to squeeze more renewable electricity from its onshore wind farms. Scottish Power has said that it planned hybrid technology by adding solar panels to wind farms, and it would also install so-called super batteries to store electricity at sites in a bid to increase the reliability of renewable sources. The wind power firm has applied for permission to build its first solar power projects beneath the blades of existing wind farms in Cornwall, Lancashire and Coldham. Scottish Power says it hopes to include solar panels in the vast majority of its future onshore wind farms across Scotland and Ireland, depending on whether the ground conditions are suitable. This is a great idea, surely.
Yeah, they started this a quite a few months ago, actually, up at Whiteley's wind
the
farm.
The wind farm to the south of Glasgow.
Where they introduced a battery capture system.
They haven't got solar yet, but
they haven't got solar yet. No. But they're capturing the excess electricity that is
not
coming
used
off of the windmills at this time.
Yeah.
I would have thought that these capacitors that have...
Is that the device they use for the batteries?
They have so much... they have so much capability
to hold that power in.
And if it is being produced on a daily basis, which is constantly getting topped up and all the rest of it, we should be tapping into that.
Because when the wind's blowing very strongly, we make too much power, we can't use it all. So it's better to store it for a time when we need it, when the wind is light or there's more demand.
Obviously it makes sense. Now, the scale that they're doing it on, when I first read about this story, was that they were actually going to erect a massive big hangar. And if you've ever been up at Whiteley, it is...
I visited it several times actually with my family.
Before its inception, it was just basically a rough ground between Eaglesham and Fenwick Moor.
A bit of high moorland, wasn't it?
High moorland, and I believe back in the day, back in the 40s and stuff like that, there was actually an airfield up there.
That probably wouldn't surprise me.
I remember as a kid, you used to run about up there, with gay abandon, and it was, it was just wild, open country. So the space that they've got, Whiteley Wind Farm is one of the biggest wind farms.
You'd think there'd be plenty of room there for solar as well. The land space is enormous.
But the point I was trying to make, Gordon, is that to tap into those reserves now, which would help our cause of just transition.
In other words, by being able to replace the power lost from burning coal or oil or gas to generate power.
But I mean, think bigger than that. Think bigger than that, and think, hey,
electric
wait a minute.
Cars, electric buses.
Electric cars, electric buses. We could, clean up Glasgow, and also reinvigorate its infrastructure.
Well, I've been talking with various people over the last few days, and the general consensus is that if the SNP were to gain us or help us to get our independence, one of the first things they should do is say that there'll be no more internal combustion engines after 10 years in Scotland, which is won't be allowed. So within 10 years, we should have decarbonised our transport and infrastructure.
Correct,
Basically, no new diesel cars, no new petrol cars, etc. It can be done if the power is there to
Of course
power
it can
the cars.
be done, and not only that, going one step further as well, is not allowing cars into the city centre and using the transport system that is, in place at this moment in time. I go to the, this is completely off-piste, but I go to watch Liverpool, and I go to the Liverpool Supporters Club, which is in Byres Road, and I get the train into town, and then I jump on the subway, and I get straight over to Byres Road. No need a car.
Fantastic.
Who needs a car?
Chris, just before we finish up tonight, we've got one last good news story for you. Again, Scotland's exports this time. All right, so Scotland's goods exports are soaring at a rate more than 4 times that of the UK, new figures have revealed today. The latest HMRC regional trade statistics comparing the year ending 30th September 2019 with the year ending 2018 show that the value of Scotland's annual goods exports increased by a whopping 11.3%. That's £3.5 billion. Amazing story. How are we doing it in the middle of all this chaos?
It is actually so amazing that I would actually put this down to fake news. We are such a poor source. We are such a poor country, and we're so, we are not able to, sustain ourselves, and we solely rely on bigger countries to prop us up and let us, just scrape for the scraps off a Longshanks table.
Would it surprise you to know that the Scottish figure for exporting went up by 11.3%? The British figure, 2.4% increase.
2.4%.
So we're looking at a massive difference in the amount of gear that Scotland is manufacturing and selling abroad.
Yeah. But try telling that to a unionist MP or a unionist MEP. Or even a unionist NSP.
They'll change the subject.
They will change the subject, and they will turn it round, and they will say, it's all because of this, it's all because of that, and all the rest of it. They will do anything to deny their country, which is, like... well, Chris, stop me.
Chris, let me stop you there, right? Because I want to talk about something which I know that you are very... involved in, and that is the plight of refugees currently being detained or prevented, I should say, from leaving Calais at the moment. I understand that you visited Calais.
Yeah, I was out last weekend to Calais, and the refugee group that I work for, Eastwood Refugee Aid. Yep. We started back in 2015.
Is this where they're taking out clothes and bedding?
We take out clothes,
items,
bedding,
tents, and
tents.
Cooking
we have done,
anything.
Yeah. The first one that we done, we took out 11 vans.
Wow. 11
completely
vans.
Full to the gunnels. It was at that time it was called East Round Convoy to Calais, and we then trimmed it back. And we have found a model now where we fundraise in East Rhine and Glasgow, and basically we put everything onto a credit card, and we go over and work with our partners there who are Care for Calais.
Tell me, Chris, I mean, this is a wonderful organisation to be a part of. It must give you a great deal of satisfaction to know you're doing some good in the world. Are there many other small groups like this feeding into this?
Well, I mean,
Is it only yourselves at the moment?
Well, no. There are smaller groups in and around various constituencies, and there's one chap, I believe he's from Stirling, and he gets various constituencies higher up than him arrange for stuff to get transported to him.
Right.
He then puts it in a van. And he will do a run down to Carlisle, or he'll do a run down to Bristol.
So will he pick up from other groups on the way then? So there's a network there?
Yeah. There is a small network.
Well organised.
It's
or getting better
organised.
It
is getting better, and as I say, the sole benefactor in Calais is a group called Care for Calais.
Right.
And they have a massive big warehouse.
Hey, Chris, just out of interest, because I'd
love to have pictures.
Well, I don't know much about anything in Calais, I have to admit, but one of the things that I was curious about when you mentioned this story before we went on air was how many people are currently living rough in Calais. Is there a figure that can be put on this?
It's hard to put a definitive figure on it. No, it's not thousands. It's not hundreds. It's more in the region of hundreds. You're looking at anything between 350 to 450 in Calais and Dunkirk area. The refugees back in 2015, they actually dispersed the jungle, and there was also a kind of like a satellite camp further down in what was called the Grand Synth, and the police systematically went in and raided those camps and basically
Just
razed them to the ground. That dispersed an awful lot of refugees.
So they're basically forced to live rough on the streets in Calais then, or elsewhere, or in the woods.
They are living in the woods, and they're also living in between the sand dunes down at Sand Gap.
Have any of the local people managed to assist them in any way as well?
Some of the local people are more willing to help than others, and it is a community very, very divided. Any time that we've been out and about in the community, some people are really quite praiseful of the work that we're doing, and others won't even let us into their shops in order to buy stuff.
It's such a shame, isn't it? I mean, people are that desperate that they've had to basically walk across Europe. But
you see, they've went to the furthest point of Europe and realised that the UK is not...
It's closed.
It's not the silver bullet that they were looking for. And they've had to migrate back. And so quite a lot...
They're having to turn around and head back to their original starting points in North Africa and other places.
Well, not as far flung as North Africa, because having made that initial crossing, the last thing they want to do is to make that crossing again, because they're heading into uncertainty.
So would they be heading to the southern points of Europe? Like
they're trying to go for the southern points of Europe, sort of like France, Spain, Italy, Germany as well. Angela Merkel has been absolutely brilliant in facilitating quite an awful lot of the resettlement of refugees. But the point I was wanting to make is that back in 2015, 2016, they were in Calais, Dunkirk, and because the police systematically broke up these camps, they have further regressed into France. So they are now in Paris itself, and they are under the they are under the motorway.
So they're living under the abutments now.
Camped under the motorway. And they are honestly...
it must be freezing.
It's absolutely bitter cold. Bitter cold. And what the police do, they systematically, as soon as Care for Calais give out a tent, it could be 2 or 3 days, and the police just slash the tent.
It makes you wonder, Chris, if there's only a few hundred of them left, why they're not just dispersed around Europe and given a place to live.
Well, most of them are trying to, most of them have got to the point of sort of like, right, okay, it's not happening for us, we're not getting to Britain.
They need to find their family members as well, don't they?
Correct, because some of them do still have families, and some of the families are still in the areas where they've migrated from.
Chris, do you believe that there's a role here maybe for the United Nations, the humanitarian wing of the United Nations, to actually do something about these people?
The United Nations, honestly, I have been so disappointed with the United Nations.
Hands and fret.
They seem unwilling to, or I don't know if it's the United Nations, but
it seems like the member states.
The EU is, I firmly point the blame at the EU. Do you think
that they are not wanting to encourage any further migration by being really hard on these poor people?
Correct.
Making an example of them.
What's more worrying is that the person who heads up Care for Calais, Claire Mosley, she was telling me that it's going to get a lot worse in Calais for the refugees that are there, because there is a new mayor coming in,
and this
new mayor has got absolutely no time for migration in any such way, shape or form. And if you look at what's happening in France today, although we didn't have a chance to discuss it, France has got its own issues with the regards unions striking and trains going on strike, and and services grinding to a halt. The last thing that they need is to be worrying about the refugees. Do you know what I mean?
Well, listen, Chris, thank you very much for that unique insight into the work that's being done.
I'd love to do a full hour special.
Perhaps later on we can. Unfortunately, this evening we've run out of time, folks. I'm sorry, we've come to the end of our show tonight. But I just wanted to remind you that we're very grateful to all our donors who have been flooding our crowdfund with money. Our current total stands for this week at £2,380. So we're getting close to our target to be able to continue our work. We are looking we're looking at 10% of the 20,000 that we need for our annual running costs at the moment. That's been raised just in a single week. So thank you all very much.
Absolutely
Please continue to give as much as you can. The details of how to donate to Broadcasting Scotland are on your screens at the moment, part of our crowdfunder. You will find us online. Hopefully we will see some graphics and a video coming up now which will tell you all about it.
That's been done by Broadcasting Scotland in giving community activists, yes activists, Scottish activists a platform other than the traditional media outlets.
Well, there you are, ladies and gentlemen. A nice video there to show you what the kind of work that Broadcasting Scotland is currently doing, and we plan to do far more. That's about it for us for tonight. Thank you for watching. We'll be back again next week on Monday, and I will see you both on Monday and Thursday next week. So from all of us here at the Broadcasting Scotland studio and from the crew here at Scotland at 7, a very good night to you.